Hey everyone, it's James Lynch. Ian Garry was on the MMA Hour today, and we're going to talk about that interview and some of the stuff that Ian said on here. And I honestly think Ian Garry came across even worse than he was prior to this. There's a number of things he talks about that I disagree with. We're going to talk about that. And then at the end, I'm going to talk about some things that I think Ian Garry should be doing to win people over if he wants to start being this quote unquote disruptor that he talks about in this interview. So we're going to watch some of the bits. We're not going to go through the entire thing. It's 32 minutes, but there's some key points that he talks about here. And let's get into it right now.
Why did this all start, Ian? Why do you think that there are so many people trying to hate on you?
I don't like this question, the way it's being framed here. Why are people, it's pretty obvious why Ian Garry's being hated on. I did a whole video on this. You can watch it here. From the Jeff Neal mugshot to the attacking Neil Magny to the Luke social media posts. Like, why are people ignoring all these things? That's why Ian Garry's getting attacked here. So right off the bat, like this whole, like, I can't believe that you're being attacked. Like, it's pretty obvious. I think to anyone who's been paying attention to this, Ian Garry is being attacked for things that Ian Garry did. It's as simple as that. So, you'll hear his answer here, but like this idea that like, I can't believe I'm being attacked. Like it's pretty obvious.
I feel like a lot of people are sheep and a lot of people believe some ridiculous things online and they run with it. And then a lot gets kind of Chinese whispers taken out of context. And a lot of people don't understand my personal life or anything to do with it or anything to do with me, my family, my team.
I will agree with him on this. Some of the stuff online about Garry and his wife and all that, that's been overblown. People are being a little bit obsessive here. But this is the environment that Garry has created because, like I said in that other video, he's going after 3 fighters that are pretty nice guys that aren't controversial at all. And you're almost trying to like bully them and attack them. So of course you're going to get people on the other side of the equation doing the same tactics you're using against you. So listen, while I do agree with that people shouldn't be attacking his family, I also think that like, dude, you brought this on yourself.
Might have all come my way because of my success and my rise and everything I'm doing. And
no, it's what you did to these other fighters. Like, again, no one had an issue with Ian Garry when he fought Keenan Song. Like, leading up to that fight, there were no issues with Garry at all. I didn't hear any chatter whatsoever. It started from the Jeff Neal mugshot onwards. Like, I don't know why people, and even kind of Ariel in this interview is kind of pretending that like this was out of nowhere. It didn't come out of nowhere. There's a reason why people are going after Ian Garry. It's because of what he's done to those 3 fighters I just mentioned. It's just honestly baffling that he's taking this approach. Like, embrace it. Say, look, I was trying to cause a bit of controversy here. I understand people being upset, but you guys are being obsessive. Take that route. At least acknowledge it. But this like whole thing of him pretending that he didn't do anything to these other fighters is just baffling to me. It really is. So now this is the part of the interview where Ariel talks about Garry being a disruptor. And like, I don't have a problem with fighters talking trash and trying to promote themselves or whatever. I just think he's gone about it the wrong way. And we'll talk about that a little bit later in the video. But at least they're acknowledging that like, hey, he is trying to poke the bear and create a bit of controversy here.
You know, over the past 2 years or so since you entered the UFC, I've heard you say to me and others, like, you want to be a disruptor, right? You did that in Boston, even in July, like you were a hot topic because you wore the T-shirt with the mugshot and whatnot.
There we go.
Was there any part of you that came to the realization like, hey, if I'm going to be a disruptor, I'm going to have to deal with what comes with that?
No.
Yes. How do you not know that?
My job is selling it. My job is promoting my fight to the best level I can, to show up and have the most fun at the fight night I can. I'm not viciously assaulting and attacking people's families.
Whoa. Neil Magny, you were like, again, we've talked about this before, and I know there's going to be people in the comments going, Neil Magny is a terrible person. Neil Magny made a bad analogy. Ian Garry ran with that bad analogy and accused Neil Magny of being a child abuser to the point of where Neil Magny was going through a separation with his wife, and that his comments actually impacted the visitation rights, almost impacted the visitation rights with his kids. So this idea of I'm not going after anyone's families, you were riding with the fact that he was a child abuser, despite the fact that Neil Magny does not have a single history, doesn't have any history of being a child abuser here. So he's talking about, I don't go after people's families. Yes, you did against Neil Magny. Like, come on, man. Like, embrace this. That's the problem I have. It's like he's pretending that he's this other guy that he's not, but he's doing the things that he's saying that I would never do that. He's doing those things. So that's where I think people have issue with Ian Garry, and they're seeing right through it.
In any way, shape, or form, to the way that the MMA world is going at a very toxic level. I mean, the best example is he's an absolute piece of shit for doing this, but it's a perfect example.
Now, I will give him credit for this here. He's talking about Colby. I've said this from the beginning. He goes after Colby. That's a smart move, especially after UFC 296 now, where Colby, I think, has really polarized a lot of fans now. Even Colby supporters, they weren't happy about the fight. They weren't happy about the comments with Leon Edwards' father. This is good. This is probably the only good thing that Garry did in this interview was he talked about Colby Covington and angling for a fight with that in the future, which makes a lot of sense, right? Like, it would be a big fight. Obviously, there's people that, whether you love or hate Colby, people want to see him lose. So Garry would win fans over, I'm sure, by going after Colby. And it's a fight in his division. Like, all this makes sense. This is the only good thing that came out of this interview was that Garry did go a bit after Colby and angled for a fight with that in the future, with Colby in the future. And I think that's a smart move here from Garry. So we'll hear a little bit more. Again, I'll give credit where it's due. I think him talking about Colby here was smart. It's stuff after that he talks about that I don't agree with, but let's get to the Colby stuff first.
You've got someone like Colby Covington, who isn't trash talking, he's desperate. To the point at which he mentioned a person's, his father's murder to sell a fight. He used that sore point in someone's life to try to stay relevant.
Okay, funny thing about that though is he's talking, and listen, I agree with him. I've been very vocal about this. What Colby said about Leon's father, offside, you shouldn't be doing stuff like that. He's talking about that's a tough point. It touches a nerve. What is wearing a mugshot of someone who got arrested for a DUI? That's not a tough point. Like, come on, man. This is my issue here. He's trying to be this, like, I would never do that guy, but he literally did that with Jeff Neal. And again, Jeff Neal did not provoke Ian Garry whatsoever when they were supposed to fight initially last year. He didn't do anything. There was no trash talk whatsoever. He shows up in this photo wearing Jeff Neal's mugshot. His wife's laughing. And by the way, people ask, like, why they've been going after his wife as well. She's laughing at this too. They're laughing at Jeff Neal's worst night of his life. And it's on display in a mugshot with a t-shirt that Ian Garry was selling. Like, come on, man. Like, at least tell the truth here for a bit. Like, to try and lie to an audience here and say that I've never done something like this disrespect. Like, that is pretty disrespectful. A mugshot of a guy. And yes, it's public information, but still, like, you think Jeff Neal's thrilled about that? No. A lot of fighters that I talked to were really annoyed by that Ian Garry would go that low for no reason. Like, Jeff didn't, I can understand if Jeff provoked Ian Garry or did something, and maybe you go that route if you really want to spice things up. But Jeff Neal coming into that fight didn't do anything. And out of the blue, Garry starts wearing a mugshot at him. Like, come on, man. You're sitting here saying that, like, oh, you know, I would never do that. You did do that. Come on, man.
That's the point in MMA where we're at. And then we've got people like Sean Strickland who are talking all that mad stuff online, attacking people's families and people's wives. And the truth is, he is just someone who is dealing with his childhood trauma, the hurt and the pain from his past.
And we might as well get into the Strickland stuff now, because he talks a bit about Strickland a bit later here. We're going to go a bit further. They talked about the back and forth, the messages, all that stuff here. But let's get into this one part right here where he's talking about, Ariel's asking him about his hit list, and he gets into the part about fighting Sean Strickland, which, like, you're in the welterweight division. You're angling for a fight with a guy that might not be champion by the time you want to move up. Like, there's just, anyways, we'll get into it here.
Whether it's this year or whether it's next year, I'd love Sean Strickland, because any man or any person who ever talks or mentions me, my wife, and my family in that way, I'm going to get my hands on. And in an ideal world, towards the end of the year, I don't think Sean Strickland's going to be the world champion anymore. And I believe there's absolutely an opportunity for me to step up to middleweight and give him a hiding. And maybe I'll beat him so bad that he'll forget all that trauma from his childhood and he can thank me.
And
so he just talks about not going after people's families and talking about all this stuff. And now he's talking about Sean Strickland's traumatic childhood, which has everything to do with his family. And he's saying, I'm going to beat the trauma out of him. Right? Like, again, this is my thing. Like, if you're going to go and criticize other people like Colby for going to the jugular and talk about people's families, why are you doing the exact same thing and then saying, well, I would never do that? And he's just doing it right here. This is the problem. Like, if you want to be this bad guy, if you want to be someone that is this villain and everybody hates you, like Colby has successfully done, then you can't then go back and say, I would never do that, because he's doing it right here with going after Strickland and talking about his trauma and all this different stuff. And that's where I think he's losing people. Garry is. If I were Ian Garry, this is what I would do. I would take the Colby route. I would not apologize. I would not limit my social media posts. I would let everything out in the open. That's one thing with Colby. Like, people can hate Colby all they want. Colby's never hidden a post or locked his account because of comments he was getting or anything along those lines. Colby never did that. Colby just was like, whatever. I put it out there. Say whatever you want. So there's that. The other part is Colby's never apologized for anything. He's never apologized for the things he said to Leon. He never apologized for, anything that Colby's done that might have been across the line. He's never apologized for that because Colby is playing that character of being the villain. Garry is trying to do both. He's trying to be this bad guy, but then also say, well, I would never do that. So it's like, you can't win both ways. Like, you can't try and be this like over the line bad guy and then also say, well, I would never say that about someone's family, when I just showed you a couple examples here of how he is going after people's families. So it's like, come on, man. So this is my thing. Like, I don't know where Gary's getting his advice from. I don't know who's around him. I don't know if it's, the people closest to him or telling him to kind of go this route. But Ian Garry should either go full bad guy or cut all this stuff out and say, you know what, I made a mistake. I'm going to be, I'm young and immature. I don't want to deal with this trash talk or anything. I'm just going to, focus on my fights. You got to pick one or the other. But he's trying to play in the middle here, and it's just making him lose more fans. And I'm not alone here. Go look at the comments on this video. Most of the people here are against Ian Garry. Considering this thing he said about two of his opponents, it's good karma. Boils me seeing Ian Garry ranting and crossing the lines 15 minutes while playing innocent and twisting Neil Magny's words. Like, all the comments here are anti-Ian Garry stuff. Pick one or the other. Be the bad guy or be the guy who takes the high road. You can't do this in the middle thing because it's just going to make you lose fans. And not to mention the fact that I think Ian Garry's got to look at the optics of his career. He's got a tough fight coming up here against Jeff Neal in the welterweight division. He's undefeated. If he beats Jeff Neal, he's going to get in that contender spot at welterweight. Focus on that. All this other stuff, Strickland, stuff that people are saying online, whatever, that's all a distraction, and that's only going to hinder his ambitions of going for the welterweight title. He's talking about fighting Strickland. Focus on your own division first and then worry about Strickland after. If he had come on here and said, hey, you know what, Sean Strickland, I'll fight you in the future. We will fight at some point and we'll take care of business. He's already talking about fighting him next year. What if you beat Jeff Neal and beat one other opponent and then you're in a title fight? Do you really want to move up and fight Sean Strickland for no reason and waste the prime of your career? Like, this is what I mean. Like, whoever's around Garry right now is giving him bad advice. That's just my personal opinion. I have nothing against Ian Garry. I just think he's going about this all the wrong way. And I think it's one of those things that, is going to hurt his career in the long run. So that's my thoughts. Again, you can watch the full interview. I have the link in the description. He said a bunch of other stuff, but these are kind of the key things of this interview, is that he's trying to play this like, I'm not a bad guy. And then he goes along and says some pretty disrespectful stuff. So that's kind of my thoughts on the video. So I want to know what you guys think in the comment section below. Do you agree with me here? Do you think Garry is only hurting himself more doing interviews like this where he's contradicting himself? That's basically what this comes down to. And what do you think about his fight against Jeff Neal? Do you think Jeff Neal wins? Do you think he wins? What do you think? Is this going to be a distraction? I want to know your opinions in the comments. Follow me on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, @LynchOnSports. I'm James Lynch. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.